why don't we move on to another one? I don't know how we're doing on time, Camden, but
maybe one more at this pace.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe two.
Well, I'll give you this one. You said you could talk for days about this, but I'll just give you a couple minutes because you've treated this in your Introduction to Covenant Theology course.
Oh no, yeah,
and in other places. But this comes from a brother who's working through Lane's introductory course on the theology and apologetics of Van Til. And he has a question about the idea of advancement and inheritance in the covenant of works. He asks, where does the idea of advancement or inheritance come from with regard to the covenant of works? Why is it not merely maintenance in the pure fellowship and blessing of God that is already granted in creation? In other words, Adam and Eve were created in a pure fellowship and blessing and covenant and would maintain what was already granted. Adam would not earn anything by maintaining covenant. He would only continue in the grace he had already received in creation. How would you reply, brother?
Yeah, a few problems with that. The two main reasons for that is first the state in which Adam was created. The second is regarding the symbolism and the presence of the tree of life in Revelation and what we see it. So these are short, tidier, to-the-point answers. There's a lot more that could be said. I have several lectures on this material and bear this out exegetically with more than a tip of the hat to Lane and Strimple and others. But Adam was created mutable. He was not confirmed in righteousness and holiness and elevated knowledge. He lost it. As he was created, there was no defect. There was nothing wrong with him. There was no problem. There was no sin. God created everything, and behold, it was very good. Yet God created him with an intention that he would be elevated to a higher state of union and communion with him. How do we know that? Well, one, God came and went in the garden. He wasn't there all the time. His presence was more or less in various ways. So it wasn't consummate and confirmed full presence with God. The fellowship that Adam had with the Lord was blessed, but it was not consummate. Moreover, clearly, Adam wasn't confirmed and perfected, and by that I don't mean perfect as opposed to sin, like sin and perfect, or imperfect, perfect. I'm speaking teleologically, eschatologically. He wasn't yet perfected or mature, is what Paul would say, using the word teleos or teleon, complete, adequate, equipped for every good work. That's the word teleos is in there, as well as Colossians 1:28. I think it's also implied in other places like the Great Commission. It's connected to the idea there of making disciples. Regardless, there was more held out for Adam, which is implicit in the promise of life. It's not explicit. There's a promise of death for violating God's word, but implicit in that is the promise of eschatological, final, consummate life, full beatitude. How do we know that? Well, among other things, we see the symbolism of the tree of life in Revelation 2 and 22, and the promise of the resurrected Messiah promising to grant to the overcomer to eat of the tree of life. Jesus, on the other side of his resurrection and consummation, well, not consummation yet, but his resurrection and session, now looking forward to the consummation of all things, promises to John in a vision. After he raises John from the dead, so to speak, John falls down at his feet as though dead. Jesus raises him up, tells him not to fear, and gives him the promise, ultimately, of an eschatological life in the new heavens and the new earth. And that is symbolized in the partaking of and eating of the tree of life. Moreover, we see that the tree of life, although there is great continuity between the tree of life as it appears in Genesis and the tree of life as it appears in Revelation, there is also discontinuity because it is called the tree of life. The location of that tree is called the paradise of God. Eden and the new heavens and the new earth are called paradise. Nevertheless, the tree is very different in Revelation because it spans the river entirely. It's on either side of the river. I take that to be prophetic idiom, as though it is expanded such that the trunk of the tree is so large that it's on both banks. Moreover, it bears its 12 kinds of fruits, symbolizing the fullness of God's people, and it bears that fruit in all seasons. So we see the tree mentioned in Psalm 1, or where is it, Jeremiah 17? I forget the precise chapter. We see this tree planted by streams of water. Its roots go out into the water and it bears fruit. Even in drought, it bears fruit constantly. So its symbol is, the symbolism here is one of full consummate life, everlasting forevermore, full blessedness. It's even greater than the Garden of Eden. So the short answer, look at Revelation. It's better than Genesis. That's the short answer. And how do we know that? It's primarily through the tree of life and the fact now that Christ, as resurrected, grants to the overcomer to eat of that tree. So for a whole host of exegetical reasons, we can I believe, confidently conclude that the full intent was never for us to stay in the garden as it was created. If Adam would have obeyed throughout his probation, however long that was supposed to be, and I'm not even speaking chronology, it might just be event-based. If he would have crushed the head of the serpent when the serpent came to tempt him, that might have satisfied the probation. But he wasn't the overcomer, and so he didn't get to eat of the tree of life. He was banished. But Jesus Christ is the overcomer. He did crush the head of the serpent, and he grants now to all of his people who triumph in him, who are more than conquerors in him, to eat of that tree in the paradise of God, but not Eden as it was originally created. No, to eat in it in the paradise of God, to which Eden itself pointed. That's what I would say to that. And that's what we mean by the phrase eschatology precedes soteriology. That promise of a heightened, glorious, consummate life was present and offered before the need for salvation.
Wonderful.